My son told me it was just for the weekend. A respite stay, he called it, while they dealt with a leak in the guest bathroom. 2 nights, maybe 3. He'd packed my bag himself. 3 shirts, my blood pressure pills, my reading glasses, nothing else, and signed me in at the front desk of Bellhaven Senior Living like he was checking a coat. 9 days later, I called my own house to ask when he was coming to get me. A woman I had never heard before answered on the second ring and said, "I'm sorry. Who is this?" As if I were the one who didn't belong there. Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm glad you're here with me today. If you're watching this from somewhere I've never been, drop your city in the comments so I know who's sitting with me tonight. And a quick note before we start. This video contains fictionalized elements woven together for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but I promise you the feeling underneath this story is real for more people than you'd think. Let's get into it. I am 74 years old, and for 41 of those years I made my living as a locksmith. Marsh and Son Lock and Key, though there was never a son in the business. That was just what my father called it when he handed me the shop in 1974, and I never had the heart to change the sign. I know what it means when something won't open the way it's supposed to. I know the particular sound a mechanism makes right before it gives, that small metallic sigh of something finally letting go. I spent 4 decades listening for that sound in other people's doors. I did not expect, at 74, to hear it in my own life. My wife Corinne passed 6 years ago in March on a Tuesday, in the bed we'd shared for 39 years, with her hand in mine and the kitchen radio playing low down the hall because she liked to fall asleep to voices. After she went, the house on Delridge Street got quiet in a way I hadn't prepared for. I'd fixed locks in half the houses on that street. I knew which neighbors kept spare keys under which flower pots, though I never told a soul, because a man in my trade learns the value of silence the way other men learn the value of money. My son Marcus is 46 now. He was born in the upstairs bedroom of that house. In a February so cold the pipes froze twice that winter, and I remember standing in the hallway outside the door listening to Corinne's voice getting quieter and the midwife's getting steadier, and thinking that whatever happened next, I would spend the rest of my life making sure that boy never wanted for anything. I kept that promise for a long time, maybe too long, maybe past the point where keeping a promise stops being love and starts being something else, something with a different name I hadn't learned yet. Marcus married Denise 9 years ago. She was polite to me at the wedding, polite at Thanksgivings, the particular kind of polite that keeps its hand extended but never quite lets you hold it. After Corinne died, Marcus started coming around more, which I mistook at first for grief drawing us closer. He'd sit in my kitchen and ask how I was managing the house, whether the stairs were getting to be too much, whether I'd thought about options. I told him the stairs were fine. I'd built the railing myself in 1988, oak sanded 3 times, and it had held my full weight in a house fire evacuation once. I trusted that railing more than I trusted most people. By the 2nd year without Corinne, the visits had a different shape to them. Marcus would walk through the house with his phone out, not texting, just holding it, the way a man holds a clipboard when he's taking inventory of something he expects to own eventually. He asked about the deed. He asked whether I'd updated my will since Mom passed. He asked, more than once, in the gentle voice people use when they've rehearsed a question, whether I'd ever considered giving him power of attorney, just in case, just so things go smoothly if anything ever happens. I want to be honest with you here, because this story only means something if I am. I signed it. In the spring of last year, sitting at my own kitchen table with the good pen Corinne bought me for my 60th birthday, I signed a durable power of attorney making my son the legal decision-maker over my finances and my medical care, should I ever become unable to make those decisions myself. I did it because he was my son, because I had rocked him to sleep in that upstairs bedroom, because when you have spent 40 years fixing the locks that keep other families safe, you do not expect to need one on your own front door against your own blood. The call came on a Thursday in September. Marcus said there was a slow leak behind the guest bathroom wall, something about the flashing around the old chimney stack letting water in, and the contractor needed the house empty for the weekend to open up the drywall without worrying about dust and fumes around me. "Just a couple nights, Dad," he said. "Bellhaven's got a respite program, real nice. Denise's aunt stayed there after her hip surgery and loved it. I already called and got you a room. I'll pick you up Sunday. I want you to understand that none of this sounded strange to me at the time. I am a careful man by trade, but a trusting man by nature where my son is concerned. And those two things had never before come into conflict. Marcus packed my bag himself while I finished my coffee. 3 shirts. My blood pressure medication in its little organizer box. The days already filled in by Denise's careful handwriting. My reading glasses. My hearing aid charger. He did not pack my address book, which sat in the drawer of the front hall table where it had sat for 30 years, and I did not think to ask for it because why would a man pack an address book for a weekend at a place with a leak in the bathroom? He signed the intake paperwork at Bellhaven himself, standing at the front desk with a folder I hadn't seen before, thick, tabbed with little colored flags along the edges the way Corinne used to flag pages in her recipe books. The woman at the desk, a kind-faced administrator named Priscilla, asked him a few questions I only half heard, and he answered them smoothly, the way you answer questions you already know are coming. I remember thinking, distantly, the way you notice a draft in a room without getting up to check the window, that it was strange he had the paperwork already filled out before we'd even walked in the door. I did not follow that thought anywhere. I was 74 years old and my son was taking care of things, and for 6 years since Corinne died, I had been the only one taking care of anything, and some tired, worn-down part of me was simply grateful to set the weight down. He hugged me at the door of my room. 2 nights, Dad. Maybe 3 if the contractor's slow. I'll call you. Then he left, and I sat down on the edge of a bed that was not mine. In a room that smelled of industrial disinfectant instead of cedar and cast iron, and I did not think anything was wrong. Not yet. Sunday came. Marcus did not. I called his cell phone at 10 in the morning. It rang through to voicemail, a recording of his voice sounding younger than he actually was, and I left a message that I tried to keep light. Hey bud, it's Dad. Just wondering when you're swinging by. No rush. By evening I had called 4 more times. By Monday I had stopped trying to keep it light. Priscilla, the administrator, came by my room on Tuesday with a clipboard and an expression I recognize now as the professional cousin of pity. Mr. Marsh, she said, I want to check in. Your son mentioned when he enrolled you that this might be an extended respite stay, possibly a few weeks, while some family matters get sorted out at home. Did he not go over that with you? I sat very still on the edge of the bed. A few weeks. I had packed for a leak in a bathroom wall. He's the point of contact on your intake, Priscilla continued gently, checking her clipboard, and he's listed with financial power of attorney, so all billing and any care decisions route through him. Is there anything I can help clarify? There is a particular kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. I had felt it once before, standing in the ER waiting room the night Corinne's heart first gave her trouble, 3 years before it finally took her. I felt it again now, sitting on a stranger's bed in a stranger's room, hearing a stranger tell me that my son had quietly rerouted the entire architecture of my remaining life through a piece of paper I'd signed at my own kitchen table, trusting him. I'd like my address book, I said. It's in the front hall table drawer at my house. Can someone call and ask him to bring it? Priscilla's face did something complicated. I can certainly reach out, she said. Though I should mention, when your son called to extend the stay, he mentioned the house might be tied up with the repairs for a while. He didn't leave a new number for us to reach the house directly, only his cell. I asked her for a house phone. She brought me one from the front desk, the kind with oversized buttons for residents whose hands had started to shake, and I sat on the bed and dialed the number I had known by heart since 1979, the number of the house I had lived in for 45 years, the number that had once rung with Corinne's voice answering, Marsh residence, in the specific bright tone she used for anyone who wasn't family. A woman answered on the second ring. Not Denise, a voice I had never heard in my life. Young, a little wary, the careful voice of someone answering a phone in a house that isn't theirs and isn't sure they should be picking it up at all. Hello, this is Walter Marsh, I said. I'm calling my house. Who is this? A pause longer than it should have been. I'm sorry, who is this? Is this about the lease? I sat with the phone against my ear the way you sit with a nail halfway into wood, waiting to find out if the next strike is going to split the grain or seed it clean. The lease, I said. We just moved in 2 weeks ago, the woman said, her voice gaining a little confidence now that she'd decided I wasn't a threat, just an old man with a wrong number. Through the property management company on Gerard. Is there something wrong with the unit? I did not answer her right away. Down the hall of Bellhaven Senior Living, someone's television was playing a game show, tinny and cheerful. The studio audience laughing at something I would never know the punchline to. I looked at the oversized numbers on the phone in my hand and thought about the oak railing I had sanded 3 times in 1988, and wondered whether whoever was living in that house now had any idea it had held a family's whole weight once, evacuation and all. No, I said finally. Nothing's wrong with the unit. I'm sorry to bother you. And I hung up before she could ask me anything else, because I did not yet have words for what had just happened to me, and I was not going to hand my confusion to a stranger who had done nothing wrong except answer a phone. I did not sleep that night. Bellhaven's walls were thinner than I expected, and I lay in a bed that smelled of bleach and listened to the hallway settle into its overnight rhythm. A cart will squeaking somewhere, a call button chiming twice, the low murmur of a night nurse's radio. Somewhere around 2 a.m., a man's voice came through the wall from the next room, low and steady, humming something that took me a full minute to place. Patsy Cline. My neighbor apparently had good taste and no shame about using it at 2 a.m. I got up and knocked on the shared wall, the way you'd knock on a workshop door, and a voice called back, "Come round. It's open." His name was Frank Delacroix, 79, a retired family court judge from 3 counties over, sharp-eyed in the particular way of men who spent 30 years reading rooms for the truth underneath what people were telling him. He was sitting up in bed with a paperback and a reading lamp, and when I told him what had happened, the leak that wasn't a leak, the weekend that wasn't a weekend, the woman's voice in my own kitchen, he set the paperback down very deliberately, the way a man sets down a tool he's about to need with both hands. "Walter," he said, "I want you to tell me exactly what you signed and exactly when." I told him. The durable power of attorney, signed last spring, financial and medical, no restrictions I could recall, no expiration date, no oversight clause. Frank listened the way Gene the pastor in that other story you might have seen listens, the way people listen when they've spent a career hearing the worst version of family stories and have learned not to flinch at any of them. "That's a broad instrument," Frank said finally. "Financial power of attorney like that, if it's durable and unrestricted, gives him legal authority to manage, potentially to sell or lease real property in your name so long as he's acting on paper in your interest. A lot of families never think to put guardrails on it because they never imagine needing them." He looked at me over his glasses. "Did you get a second opinion before you signed it? An elder law attorney? Someone independent of your son?" I told him I hadn't. I told him I'd trusted my boy. "That's not a character flaw, Walter," Frank said, and something in his voice made it clear he'd said some version of that sentence in his courtroom more times than he could count. "That's just what love looks like before it gets tested. But now it's been tested, and I think you know that." I sat in the chair by his bed until nearly 4 in the morning, and by the time I stood up to go back to my own room, I had a plan taking shape, the way a plan takes shape in a workshop before you've cut a single piece of wood, not finished, not perfect, but real enough to start. The next morning I called my niece, Yolanda, my late brother's daughter, 31 years old and 2 years into working as a paralegal at an elder law firm 2 towns over. I hadn't spoken to Yolanda in nearly 8 months, not out of any falling out, just the ordinary drift of a family scattered across 3 states. She picked up on the first ring. "Uncle Walter," she said, and something in her voice sharpened immediately when I told her where I was calling from and why. Okay, don't say anything else to Marcus if he calls, and don't sign anything else Bellhaven puts in front of you without me looking at it first. I'm coming Saturday." Yolanda arrived Saturday morning with a leather folder and the particular calm of a young woman who had decided, somewhere on the drive over, exactly how angry she was allowed to let herself get in front of her uncle, and had settled on controlled and useful, rather than the more satisfying alternative. We sat in the Bellhaven common room, at a table by the window that looked out over a small courtyard garden someone kept meticulously, and Yolanda walked me through what I actually had. The power of attorney was real and, as Frank had guessed, broad. Under it, Marcus had legal grounds to lease the Delridge Street house. The deed itself hadn't transferred, my name was still on it, but he'd had the authority to sign a rental agreement in my stead, collect the deposit, and route the funds wherever the document allowed, which, as it turned out, was any account for the benefit of the principal. A phrase broad enough to drive a moving truck through, which was more or less exactly what had happened. "He hasn't stolen the house," Yolanda said carefully. "Not yet, not technically. But he's been paying himself a management fee out of the rental income for 2 weeks. He moved every stick of furniture that wasn't nailed down into a storage unit under his name, and Bellhaven's billing is coming out of your pension account directly because he listed himself as the authorized payer." She looked up at me. "Uncle Walter, this is what's called financial exploitation of an elder. I know that's an ugly phrase to hear about your own son. I'm not going to soften it because you deserve to hear it plainly, the way you'd want a Locke's true condition explained to you rather than guessed at." I thought about the address book still sitting in a drawer of a house I no longer had a key to. I thought about the oak railing. I thought about Marcus at 4 years old, standing on the 3rd step of that railing, refusing to come down until I lifted him myself, laughing the whole way. "What do?" I said. Not a question really. More like handing her a broken mechanism and asking her to tell me what was salvageable. "2 things today," Yolanda said. "First, we file a report with Adult Protective Services. Not to punish him, to create a record, and to get a caseworker assigned who has to independently verify your well-being and your wishes, which protects you no matter what happens next. Second, you revoke the power of attorney. You have the right to do that at any time, as long as you're of sound mind, and no doctor in this building is going to tell you otherwise." I brought the revocation forms. We file them with the county recorder and send certified notice to Marcus and to the property management company on Gerard. So the lease and the accounts have to be untangled through you going forward, not around you. I signed the revocation with the same steadiness I'd once signed off on a repaired deadbolt, testing the mechanism twice before I trusted it. Yolanda witnessed it, Frank witnessed it from his wheelchair by the window, and Priscilla the administrator, when we asked her, witnessed it too, her expression somewhere between relief and quiet vindication. The Adult Protective Services caseworker, a soft-spoken but exacting woman named Renata Cho, came to Bellhaven that Wednesday and spent 40 minutes with me alone. No family present, asking careful questions about my memory, my understanding of my own finances, whether I felt safe, whether I felt free to leave. I answered every question honestly. I was not confused. I was not incapacitated. I was, as Renata put it in the report Yolanda later showed me, an elder of full legal capacity whose autonomy had been circumvented rather than legitimately transferred. That phrase stayed with me. Circumvented rather than legitimately transferred. 40 years of fixing locks had taught me the difference between a door that opens because someone had the right key and a door that opens because someone forced the mechanism from the inside while you weren't looking. My son had done the second thing and called it the first. Renata's report triggered a freeze on the rental account tied to my name and flagged the Gerard property management file for review. Within a week, the young woman who'd answered my phone, her name, it turned out, was Priya, 26 years old, a nurse starting her first job in the county, entirely innocent in all of it, having simply answered an ad for a well-kept 2-bedroom on Delridge Street with a landlord who seemed, in her words, a little disorganized but nice enough. Received a letter from the county explaining that the lease she'd signed involved an elder financial exploitation investigation, and that her tenancy itself was not in jeopardy, but the funds she'd been paying were being redirected to a trust account under my name and Yolanda's oversight, effective immediately. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I never once asked Priya to leave that house. She had done nothing but answer a phone honestly and pay her rent on time. The wrong here was never hers to carry, and I made sure, through Yolanda, that she understood that in writing, in plain language, signed by me. Some doors you don't need to lock against people who never tried to force them. Marcus called me 11 days after I revoked the power of attorney. I was sitting in the Bellhaven courtyard, the one with the meticulous garden, on a bench Frank and I had claimed as our regular spot, when my new phone, Yolanda had gotten me a simple one, my own number, my own account, nobody else listed as payer, buzzed in my cardigan pocket. "Dad." His voice had the specific strain of a man who had rehearsed several openings and abandoned all of them in the last second before I picked up. "Dad, what is going on?" "The county called Denise. There's a caseworker." There's a freeze on the dead. Why would you do this to me? I sat very still, the way I used to sit with a stubborn lock before deciding whether to force it or listen for what it actually needed. I didn't do anything to you, Marcus, I said. I called my own house. A stranger answered. Silence on the line, long enough that I could hear, faintly, Denise's voice somewhere behind him, asking who he was talking to. I was going to explain everything, Marcus said finally, and something in his voice had gone thin, stripped of its rehearsal. The rental income was supposed to cover Bellhaven and the storage unit and, Dad, I was drowning. The business hasn't turned a profit in 2 years. Denise's mother needs a second surgery. I didn't know how else to keep everything afloat. And you had the house just sitting there, and the power of attorney said I could. It said you could act in my interest, I said. Not instead of me. There's a lock and key difference, son, and I spent 40 years learning it so you wouldn't have to. I would have helped you if you'd asked me. I would have sold that house myself and put every dollar of it in your hand if you'd sat at my kitchen table and told me the truth. What I can't forgive as easily is that you didn't think you needed to ask. You just took the key. He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't expect him to. I'm not trying to destroy you, Marcus, I said, and I meant it, the same way I'd meant every hour I spent teaching him to ride a bike in the Delridge Street driveway, patient long past the point patience made sense. I filed a report to protect myself, not to punish you. What happens with the county now is going to depend on what you do next, not on anything else I say to you tonight. Are you? His voice cracked slightly. Are you okay, Dad? Where they've got you? I'm okay, I said, and found, a little to my own surprise, that it was true. I've got a garden bench and a good friend named Frank who used to be a judge and has opinions about everything. I'm okay. We didn't resolve anything else that night. Some doors don't open all at once. But he called back 3 days later, and this time he didn't ask me for anything. He asked, instead, whether I'd talk to Yolanda about a payment plan for what he owed the trust account, and whether I'd be willing someday to sit down with him and Denise and actually talk about the business, the debt, the second surgery, all of it, honestly, the way he should have the first time. I told him yes. Not because the wound had closed. Because a road walked honestly is still a road. I moved out of Bellhaven 6 weeks later, not because anything was wrong with the place, but because I didn't need it. I never had, not really, not for what it was quietly being used for. Yolanda helped me find a small ground-floor apartment 2 blocks from Frank's daughter's house, close enough that Frank and I still meet on Tuesdays for coffee and his ongoing, deeply opinionated commentary on the state of the county court system. The Delridge Street lease, once untangled from Marcus's management, stayed in Priya's name at a fair rate set with my direct approval, and the income goes every month into an account with my name on it and nobody else's. I opened a small key and lock repair counter inside a hardware store on Cresthill Avenue 3 mornings a week. Nothing grand. A workbench, a pegboard of blanks, a bell over the door that rings the same note as the one that used to ring over the door of Marsh and Son 40 years ago, because I asked the hardware store owner, a kind man named Theodore, if I could bring my own bell from storage, and he said, of course, Mr. Marsh, whatever makes it feel like yours. The first thing I fixed, there was a deadbolt for an elderly widow named Constance, whose daughter had been borrowing her car without asking and had somehow ended up with a spare house key she was never given. I didn't tell Constance my story. I didn't need to. I just fixed the lock, quietly, carefully, the way I'd fixed 1,000 locks before, and handed her back a key that only she controlled. Marcus and Denise came to see the shop 2 weeks ago. He stood in the doorway a long moment before coming in, the way you stand at the threshold of a room you're not sure you're allowed back into, and I set down the pick I was working with and said, "Well, come in then, you're letting the cold in." It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't finished. But it was a door opened on purpose by the person who actually held the key. If there's one thing this whole ordeal taught me, it's that love and access are not the same thing, no matter how much the people asking for both want you to believe they are. I trusted my son with a key to my whole life because I loved him, and for a while he mistook that key for a right. It isn't. It never was. A key is something you're given because someone trusts you to bring it back. So here's my honest advice. One old locksmith to whoever's listening tonight. Don't hand anyone unrestricted access to your life and call it love just because saying no feels unfamiliar. Get the second opinion. Read what you're signing twice, the way you test a lock before you trust it with your front door. And if someone you love ever tells you it's just for the weekend, and something in your chest tells you otherwise, listen to that. It has probably been trying to tell you something for longer than you've let yourself hear it. These family reckoning stories aren't easy for me to sit with, but I think they're worth telling, because somewhere out there tonight is someone sitting in a room that isn't theirs, waiting for a call that isn't coming, telling themselves it's just for the weekend. It doesn't have to stay that way. If this story reached something true in you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means more than you know. One last note, some elements of tonight's story are fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. If that's not the kind of storytelling you're here for, no hard feelings at all. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.